Welcome to our channel. Here we learn new ideas and improve our English at the same time through stories. You practice English without feeling like you're studying. So let us start. Muhammad Ali was one of those rare people who became bigger than his sport. In the ring, he was brilliant. He was fast, fearless, and smarter than almost everyone he faced. He could hurt opponents with his fists, but he could also break them with timing, confidence, and nerve. Still, what made Ali truly unforgettable was not only what he did under the lights. It was the way he carried himself outside the ring, especially when life became difficult. That is where his greatness really showed. He was born Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. on January 17, 1942, in Louisville, Kentucky. His father, Cassius Sr., worked as a sign painter, and his mother, Odessa, worked cleaning homes for wealthy white families. He grew up in a religious household with his younger brother, Rudy, and by most accounts, he was a lively and polite kid. At that point, nothing about him screamed future world champion. He was not known as some natural-born athlete from day one. In fact, he was more likely to be found reading comic books or playing around than training for a sporting career. Then one small event changed everything. In 1954, when he was 12 years old, Cassius rode his new red and white bicycle to the Columbia Auditorium in Louisville. He and a friend spent the day enjoying the home show, looking around, eating snacks, and having a good time. But when they came back outside, the bike was gone. It had been stolen. Cassius was furious. He was upset enough to tell people he wanted to beat up whoever had taken it. Someone pointed him toward a local police officer named Joe Martin, who also trained young boxers at a gym nearby. When Cassius found Martin and angrily said he wanted to whip the thief, Martin gave him a simple answer: "First, you better learn how to fight." That moment became the beginning of everything. Cassius walked into Martin's boxing world and took to it almost immediately. He did not arrive as the most polished kid in the gym, but he had something coaches noticed right away: hunger. He trained hard, listened closely, and kept coming back. Joe Martin saw that this boy had unusual determination, and another local trainer, Fred Stoner, helped teach him the technical side of boxing. Together, those men helped shape his foundation. As the years passed, Cassius started piling up amateur wins. He built a strong record, collected Golden Gloves titles, and showed that he was not just talented, but deeply committed. He had a confidence too, and that became part of his style early. Even before he was famous, he believed he was going somewhere special. He talked like a champion long before the world saw him as one. That confidence could seem almost unbelievable, but it was real. At the same time, life outside the ring was not always easy. In school, Cassius struggled badly. Teachers often could not understand why a boy with so much discipline in the gym had such a hard time in class. Later, people understood more clearly that he was dealing with dyslexia, but back then, it mostly looked like poor performance. So even as boxing gave him direction, there were other parts of life where he felt misunderstood. One important person who noticed him during those years was Angelo Dundee. In 1957, Dundee was in Louisville with boxer Willie Pastrano, and the teenage Cassius somehow got connected to them. He ended up peppering them with questions and boldly announcing that he would one day become the greatest boxer in the world. That kind of claim might have sounded ridiculous from another kid, but with Cassius, it landed differently. Dundee remembered him. And that mattered, because by the end of the 1950s, young Cassius Clay was no longer just dreaming about greatness. He was moving toward it fast. By 1960, Cassius Clay had built himself into one of America's top amateur boxers. He was only 18, but already had over 100 amateur wins, several Golden Gloves titles, and national championships to his name. The next big question was whether he should turn professional right away or stay amateur long enough to chase Olympic gold. That decision mattered, and Clay knew it. He asked Angelo Dundee for advice, and Dundee gave him a smart answer. If Cassius won a gold medal first, his value as a professional would rise. So Clay stayed amateur and set his eyes on the 1960 Olympic Games in Rome. There was only one problem. He was terrified of flying. He seriously considered giving up the chance rather than getting on a plane. In the end, he was persuaded to go, reportedly with the comfort of carrying a parachute. However it happened, he made the trip, and once he got to Rome, he boxed like a man who knew exactly why he was there. He moved through the tournament with speed and confidence, beating experienced opponents from Belgium, the Soviet Union, and Australia. In the final, he faced Poland's Zbigniew Pietrzykowski, a seasoned and respected fighter. But Clay controlled the bout and won the light heavyweight gold medal. Just like that, the loud kid from Louisville was now an Olympic champion. When he returned home, people celebrated him. He wore the gold medal proudly and enjoyed the attention that came with it. But very quickly, he ran into a hard truth about America at that time. Even as an Olympic gold medalist, he was still a black man in a segregated society. One famous story says that not long after returning from Rome, he was refused service at a restaurant in Louisville because of his race. Whether every detail of that moment happened exactly as later retold or not, the larger truth was real enough. Fame and medals did not protect him from racism. That disappointment stayed with him. Soon after the Olympics, Clay turned professional. A group of local businessmen helped finance the early stage of his career, and his first pro fight came in October 1960 against Tony Hunsaker. Clay won by decision. It was a good start, but he wanted the best training possible, and that meant working with Angelo Dundee. Eventually, he made his way to Miami, where Dundee agreed to train him. That partnership changed everything. Under Dundee, Clay sharpened his style and grew into the version of himself the world would soon recognize. He had unusual movement for a heavyweight, quick feet, fast hands, and a habit of leaning away from punches that made many experts nervous. Traditional boxing minds often criticized him. They said he kept his hands too low, moved too much, and depended too heavily on reflexes. But Clay believed in his own style. He trusted his speed, his reach, and his instincts. He also understood something many athletes never fully grasp. Boxing was not only about winning, it was also about attention. Clay became a master of self-promotion. He bragged constantly, called himself the prettiest and the greatest, and spoke with a confidence that annoyed some people and fascinated others. Then he learned an even bigger lesson after seeing the wrestler Gorgeous George perform. George told him that if people paid to see someone shut your mouth, that was still a win for you. Clay understood the idea immediately. From then on, he leaned into the act even harder. He predicted knockout rounds, mocked opponents, and made every fight feel like an event before the bell even rang. But the talking was only effective because he kept backing it up. He kept winning, and he kept rising. One major step came in 1962 when he fought his former trainer, Archie Moore. Clay boldly predicted he would stop Moore in the fourth round. Then he went out and did exactly that. It was the kind of performance that made people stop laughing and start paying attention. By now, he was undefeated and knocking on the door of the heavyweight title. The champion was Sonny Liston, one of the most feared men in boxing. Liston looked terrifying, punched with brutal force, and had the kind of presence that made many opponents nervous before the fight even started. On paper, Clay was not supposed to be the man to beat him, but Clay had never cared much for paper. And as the biggest fight of his life got closer, he made sure the whole world was watching. When Cassius Clay finally got his shot at Sonny Liston, almost nobody believed he would win. Liston was the heavyweight champion, and not just any champion. He looked unbeatable. He was bigger, stronger, and had already destroyed top fighters with frightening ease. To many people, Clay was just a loud young contender who talked too much and had finally met the man who would shut him up. Clay, of course, saw it differently. In the build-up, he taunted Liston non-stop. He called him ugly, mocked him in public, and turned the whole thing into theater. Some of it was promotion, but some of it was strategy too. Clay understood that boxing was mental before it was physical. If he could upset Liston, make him angry, make him chase, then the fight might tilt in his favor before the first punch even landed. There was something else going on in Clay's life at the same time. He was becoming deeply interested in the Nation of Islam. He had started reading about Black Pride years earlier, and now that interest had turned into real involvement. He spent time with members of the group and grew especially close to Malcolm X, who became a powerful influence during that period. The more Clay learned, the more certain he became that this new faith and identity mattered to him more than public approval. That would soon become a huge national story. But first, there was the fight. On February 25, 1964, Clay stepped into the ring in Miami Beach as a heavy underdog. Many expected Liston to crush him in the early rounds. Instead, Clay boxed beautifully. He stayed light on his feet, fired quick combinations, and kept moving in ways Liston could not handle. The champion swung hard, but he could not pin him down. Round after round, Clay's speed and confidence started breaking Liston apart. Then came the shock. After 6 rounds, Liston refused to continue. Whether it was injury, exhaustion, frustration, or some mix of all three, the result was the same. The feared heavyweight champion was done. At just 22 years old, Cassius Clay had become the heavyweight champion of the world. And then, almost immediately, he changed the story again. The day after the fight, he announced publicly that he was a member of the Nation of Islam. Soon after, he dropped the name Cassius Clay, which he called a slave name, and took a new one, Muhammad Ali. For many Americans, this was even more shocking than the upset over Liston. Ali was no longer just a bold young boxer. He had become a political and cultural figure, and a controversial one. A lot of people refused to accept the new name. Some sports writers would not use it. Some opponents mocked it. But Ali did not bend. He insisted on being called Muhammad Ali, and in time, the world adjusted. He fought Liston again in 1965 and won once more. This time by first-round knockout in one of the most argued-over endings in boxing history. Whether people believed in the punch or not, the official result stood, and Ali remained champion. From there, he kept defending his title and growing more confident in every part of his life. He beat Floyd Patterson and Ernie Terrell, both of whom made a mistake of refusing to call him by his chosen name. In those fights, Ali seemed to make it personal. He was not only defending a title, he was defending his identity. By now, he was one of the most famous men in America. He was also becoming one of the most divisive. Then, in 1967, the biggest fight of his life arrived, and it did not happen in a boxing ring. Ali was drafted into the United States Army during the Vietnam War. When the moment came for him to step forward and accept induction, he refused. He said his faith would not allow him to take part, and he made clear that he could not support a war he believed was wrong. That decision cost him everything, at least for a while. He was stripped of his heavyweight title. His boxing license was taken away. His passport was removed, which stopped him from fighting overseas. In one sweep, the government took away his living at the very peak of his career. But Muhammad Ali had made his choice, and he was not about to apologize for it. For most athletes, losing a championship is the worst thing that can happen. For Muhammad Ali, losing his title was only the start of a much bigger struggle. When he refused induction into the United States Army in 1967, he knew there would be consequences, but the punishment still hit hard. He was stripped of his heavyweight crown, banned from boxing, and cut off from the career he had built with years of discipline and sacrifice. At the age when most fighters are entering their prime, Ali was forced to sit still. He did not spend those years quietly. Instead, he became one of the strongest public voices against the Vietnam War. He spoke at colleges, appeared at public events, and explained his position in a way that was direct, calm, and deeply personal. He was not trying to sound polished. He was speaking from conviction. That is a big part of why so many young people connected with him. Even people who did not agree with every part of his politics could see that he meant what he said. Those years cost him money, momentum, and precious time in the ring. But they also changed how the world saw him. He was no longer just a champion boxer. He had become a symbol of resistance, dignity, and principle. Eventually, the band began to loosen. By late 1970, Ali was finally allowed to fight again. He returned against Jerry Quarry and won, then beat Oscar Bonavena to set up the fight everybody wanted, Ali against Joe Frazier. It was called the Fight of the Century, and for good reason. Both men were undefeated, both were champions in their own way, and the tension around the fight was enormous. When they met in March 1971, Ali was still brilliant, but he was no longer quite the same fighter who had danced around Sonny Liston. Years away from boxing had taken something from him. Frazier was relentless, powerful, and completely prepared for war. The fight went 15 brutal rounds, and in the end, Frazier won by unanimous decision. It was the first loss of Ali's professional career. For many athletes, that kind of defeat changes everything. For Ali, it became fuel. He kept fighting, kept winning, and worked his way back into the title picture. There was another setback against Ken Norton, who broke Ali's jaw and handed him another painful loss. But Ali came back, adjusted, and beat Norton in the rematch. Then he got what he really wanted most, another fight with Joe Frazier. In 1974, Ali won that rematch on points, but the heavyweight title still belonged to George Foreman. Foreman looked unstoppable. He was younger, stronger, and had destroyed Frazier with shocking ease. Most people thought Ali had no realistic chance, but Ali had always been at his most dangerous when people counted him out. Their fight in Zaire in October 1974 became one of the most famous nights in sports history. Ali used a strategy nobody expected. Instead of dancing for 15 rounds, he leaned back on the ropes, covered up, absorbed pressure, and let Foreman punch himself tired. Then, in the 8th round, Ali exploded with a combination that dropped the champion. Muhammad Ali was heavyweight champion again. A year later came the 3rd fight with Frazier, the savage contest known as the Thrilla in Manila. It was one of the toughest fights ever seen. Both men were exhausted, battered, and pushed to the edge. Ali won when Frazier's corner stopped the fight before the final round, but the toll was heavy. Ali himself later said it felt close to dying. By the late 1970s, age and punishment were catching up with him. He lost to Leon Spinks, then won the rematch to become the first man to claim the world heavyweight title 3 times. After that, his career faded. The speed was no longer there, and the body that had once seemed almost untouchable was slowing down. Still, Ali's story did not end with decline. Even as Parkinson's disease took more from him physically, he remained one of the most loved figures in the world. He became a humanitarian, a public symbol of courage, and a man admired far beyond boxing. When he died in 2016, people did not remember only the knockouts or the titles. They remember the confidence, the humor, the sacrifice, and the way he stood firm when it would have been easier to bend. That is why Muhammad Ali still matters. He was a great fighter. Yes, maybe the greatest. But more than that, he showed that being a champion is not only about what you do when you are winning. It is about what you are willing to risk when the world turns against you. And that is what made Muhammad Ali unforgettable. All right. If you made it through this session today, that already says something about your discipline. This repetition and consistency combination might look boring on paper, but it is one of the most powerful ways to build fluent, natural English. Keep showing up like this, and your brain will slowly adapt. Trust the process. If this helped even a little, consider liking the video or subscribing. It lets me know these sessions are actually making a difference. We'll catch up again soon. Take care till then.